Welcome to the part 2 of our story. The campus was buzzing the next morning. News of Sada's collapse had spread like wildfire, and rumours were flying. Some said she had fainted from stress, while others whispered that it was something more sinister. "She's in the hospital," one student said during lunch, his voice hushed. "They said she's in some kind of coma." "A coma?" another girl gasped. "What happened to her?" "No one knows," the boy replied, "but they found her in the restroom near the east wing. Alone." Amara sat at the edge of the table, pretending to scroll through her phone. She kept her expression neutral, but her hands trembled slightly. "Do you think it's true?" someone whispered behind her. "That she saw something that made her go crazy?" "Like what?" another voice replied, laughing nervously. "A ghost? Or maybe." The first voice trailed off, and Amara knew what they were thinking. Her head tie. She stood abruptly, gathering her things. The students at her table fell silent, their eyes following her as she walked away. She didn't look back. Amara kept her distance from the other students for the rest of the week, but the whispers about her grew louder. Everywhere she went, she felt their eyes on her, their curiosity like a weight pressing down on her shoulders. By the end of the week, she was exhausted. The eyes on her scalp had grown restless, their whispers returning every night as she tried to sleep. "They're coming for you," one of them murmured one evening. "They know," another hissed. "Shut up," Amara whispered, clutching her head. "Leave me alone." But the eyes only laughed, their voices blending into a cacophony of taunts and warnings. The next day, she skipped her classes, unable to face the stares and questions. She stayed in her dorm, pacing back and forth, her mind racing. She needed to find a way to control the eyes, to keep them hidden. But how? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at her door. "Amara!" a voice called. She froze. It was Tunde. "I know you're in there," he said. "We need to talk." Amara hesitated, her heart pounding. She didn't want to face him, not after what had happened to Said. But Tunde was persistent, knocking again. "Please," he said. "I just want to help." "Help?" Amara frowned, her curiosity piqued. She opened the door a crack, peering out at him. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice wary. Tunde looked at her with an intensity that made her uneasy. "I know about the eyes," he said quietly. Amara's blood ran cold. Amara's grip on the door tightened, her breath catching in her throat. "What did you just say?" she whispered, her voice laced with both fear and disbelief. Tunde glanced down the hallway to ensure they were alone before leaning in closer. "I know about the eyes, Amara," he repeated. "I saw them that day in the classroom, even if it was just for a second." Panic surged through Amara. Her instinct screamed for her to slam the door in his face, but something in Tunde's expression stopped her. He didn't look afraid. He looked determined. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said quickly, trying to shut the door. Tunde placed a hand on the doorframe, preventing her from closing it. "Don't lie to me. I've seen enough to know something isn't right. And then there's Said." His voice trailed off, his gaze piercing. "She followed you, didn't she? Now she's in a coma." Amara's chest tightened. She felt trapped, cornered. "What do you want from me?" "I want to help you," Tunde said, his voice softer now. "You're not the only one dealing with strange things in this world, Amara." His words caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" Tunde hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather-bound book. He held it up so she could see the strange symbols etched into its cover. "This is why I noticed you," he said. "Because you're not normal, just like the people in this book." Amara frowned, stepping back to let him inside. Once the door was closed, she turned to face him, her arms crossed defensively. "What is that?" she asked. Tunde opened the book, flipping through its yellowed pages. "It's an old journal my grandmother gave me before she died. She said it was filled with stories of cursed people, people like you. I didn't believe her at first, but then I saw your eyes. Amara stiffened. You don't understand what you're talking about. Maybe not completely, Tonda admitted, meeting her gaze. But I know enough to realize that whatever you're dealing with is dangerous for you and everyone around you. And if you don't get it under control, it's only going to get worse. Amara's defenses began to crumble. She sank onto the edge of her bed, her hands shaking. I've tried, she said quietly. I've tried to control it, but it's like they have a mind of their own. They do, Tunda said, sitting across from her. This journal talks about spirits bound to the living. They feed on fear and curiosity. The more people notice you, the stronger they become. Amara looked up at him, her eyes wide with alarm. So, you're saying it's my fault? That I'm making them stronger? Not intentionally, Tunda said gently. But the more attention they get, the harder it will be to hide them. And if too many people see them, they'll take me, Amara finished, her voice barely above a whisper. Tunda nodded. Exactly. The room fell silent as Amara processed his words. She had spent years living in fear of the eyes, but now she realized the stakes were even higher than she'd thought. What do I do? She asked finally, her voice trembling. Tunda handed her the journal. We'll figure it out together. There's a lot in here. Rituals, symbols, maybe even a way to break the curse, but it's not going to be easy. Amara hesitated, staring at the worn book in her hands. Could she really trust Tonde? Could he help her when no one else had been able to? She looked up at him, her resolve hardening. If you're serious about helping me, then we need to move fast, because I don't think the eyes are going to wait much longer. Over the next few days, Amara and Tunda pored over the journal, searching for anything that could help her control the eyes. The book was filled with cryptic instructions and strange diagrams, most of which were difficult to decipher. Finally, Tunda found a passage that caught their attention. The ritual of silence. This might be it, Tunde said, pointing to the page. Amara leaned over to read the faded text. According to the journal, the ritual of silence was designed to subdue restless spirits by creating a barrier between them and the outside world. What do we need to do? Amara asked, her voice tight with anticipation. Tunda scanned the instructions, frowning. It says you need to perform the ritual at the stroke of midnight in a place where no one can disturb you. You'll need these ingredients. He pointed to a list that included items like black salt, a silver mirror, and a strand of hair from someone who has seen the spirits. Amara's stomach dropped. A strand of hair? From who? Tonda looked at her grimly. From Sade. Amara felt a wave of guilt wash over her. Sade was still in the hospital, unresponsive, and now she needed something from her. It felt wrong, but she knew they had no other choice. Can you get it? Tonde asked. Amara nodded slowly. I'll try. That night, Amara snuck into the hospital under the cover of darkness. Her heart pounded as she made her way to Sade's room, her footsteps eerily loud in the empty hallways. When she entered the room, she froze. Sade lay motionless on the bed, her face pale and her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. I'm so sorry, Amara whispered, tears pricking her eyes. She reached out and gently plucked a single strand of hair from Sade's head. As she did, the whispers in her mind grew louder, as though the eyes were warning her to stop. But she ignored them and left the hospital, clutching the strand of hair tightly in her hand. Now all she could do was hope that the ritual of silence would work. Amara returned to her dorm, clutching Sade's strand of hair like a lifeline. Her palms were clammy, and every shadow in the hallway seemed to move, as if the eyes on her scalp had extended their presence beyond her head. Tunde was waiting for her, pacing nervously. He jumped when she entered the room. Did you get it? He asked, his voice low but urgent. Amara held up the strand of hair. I did. Tunde exhaled, a mixture of relief and tension washing over his face. He placed the journal on the desk, where they had already assembled the other ingredients: black salt, a silver mirror, and a small brass bowl filled with water. The air in the room felt heavy, as if it anticipated the ritual they were about to perform. The instructions are clear, Tunda said, flipping to the page on the ritual of silence. We have to begin exactly at midnight. The silver mirror will reflect the eye's energy, and the black salt will create a boundary they can't cross. And the strand of hair? Amara asked, though she already dreaded the answer. It's the anchor, Tunda said, not meeting her gaze. It'll connect the ritual to the person affected by the eyes. In this case, Sade. Amara's stomach twisted. What happens to her? Tunda hesitated. The book doesn't say. But if this works, it should help both of you. Amara nodded, though doubt gnawed at her. She didn't have a choice. If they didn't try, the eyes would continue to grow stronger, and more people might end up like Sade, or worse. As the clock struck midnight, Amara and Tunda began the ritual. They spread the black salt in a wide circle on the floor, enclosing themselves and the ingredients in a protective barrier. Amara sat cross-legged in the centre, holding the silver mirror in one hand and Sade's strand of hair in the other. Tunda knelt across from her, reading the incantation from the journal. His voice was steady, but the room seemed to vibrate with an unseen energy. The air grew colder with each word he spoke. Spirits bound by flesh and fear, Tunda intoned, his voice echoing unnaturally. We command you to heed this call. Be silent, be still, be bound. The eyes on Amara's scalp began to stir, their lids fluttering as if they were waking from a deep sleep. She winced as a sharp pain shot through her head, but she held the mirror steady, angling it toward her reflection. Spirits of sight return to the void, Tunda continued. Let the vessel be free, and let the silence remain. The strand of Sade's hair began to glow faintly, a soft golden light that seemed to pulse in time with Amara's heartbeat. The whispers grew louder, overlapping in a chaotic symphony that filled the room. They're fighting it, Amara gasped, clutching her head as the pain intensified. Hold on, Tunda urged, his voice strained. We're almost there. The black salt around them began to shift, as though an invisible force was trying to break through. The eyes on Amara's scalp opened fully now, their glowing irises fixed on the mirror. Be still, Tunda shouted, his voice ringing with authority. The room erupted in a blinding flash of light. Amara screamed as the eyes seemed to writhe on her scalp, their whispers turning into guttural shrieks. She felt as though her head was on fire, the pain unbearable. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the light vanished. The room was silent. Amara collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. The mirror slipped from her hand, clattering onto the wooden boards. She touched her head gingerly, her fingers trembling. The eyes were closed. Did it work? She whispered, looking up at Tunda. Tunda stared at her, his face pale. I think so, he said, his voice barely audible. Amara let out a shaky breath, relief washing over her. But as she sat up, she noticed something strange. The black salt had been disturbed, the protective circle broken. And in the corner of the room, the silver mirror lay face down, its surface cracked. Before she could say anything, a faint whisper filled the air. We're not gone, it said. Amara's blood ran cold. The whisper echoed in the room, chilling Amara to the bone. She froze, her wide eyes darting to Tunde, who was already on his feet scanning the room. That shouldn't have happened, Tunde stammered, clutching the journal tightly. The ritual was supposed to silence them. Amara sat up slowly, her hands trembling as she touched her head. The eyes were closed, but she could feel them stirring beneath the surface, restless and angry. They're still here, she whispered. Tunde, they're still here. Tunde flipped frantically through the journal, his brow furrowed. No, this isn't right. We did everything the ritual required. We followed the steps exactly. Amara's breathing quickened. What if the curse isn't just about the eyes? What if it's deeper than that? Tunde stopped flipping and looked at her, his expression grim. What do you mean? Amara hesitated, the truth clawing its way to the surface. This This curse didn't start with me. My grandmother told me stories about our bloodline, about the deals my ancestors made to gain power. She said those deals came with a price, one that would follow us for generations. Tunde's face paled. You're saying the curse is inherited? Amara nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. The eyes, they're not just spirits. They're the remnants of those deals. They're the souls of the people my ancestors betrayed, bound to my family forever. Tunde closed the journal, his hands shaking. If that's true, then no ritual will be enough. The curse isn't just on you, it's on your entire bloodline. The weight of Tunde's words settled over Amara like a suffocating blanket. If the curse was tied to her family, then escaping it might mean severing her connection to them entirely. There has to be another way, Amara said desperately. Something in the journal, or maybe someone who knows more than us. Tunde hesitated before shaking his head. Amara, this is bigger than a single curse. It's a legacy of darkness. The only way to stop it might be to... To what? Amara demanded, her voice breaking. Tunde's gaze was steady but full of sorrow. To destroy the vessel, to destroy you. Amara recoiled, the air leaving her lungs. You're saying I have to die? Tunde looked away, unable to meet her gaze. If the eyes are bound to you, then severing the connection might be the only way to truly free them, and everyone else. For a moment the room was silent, save for the faint mocking whispers of the eyes. There has to be another way, Amara said firmly, her voice trembling but resolute. I'm not giving up my life for something I didn't ask for. If my ancestors caused this, then I'll find a way to fix it without losing myself. Tunde sighed. Amara, I'll stand by you, but we're running out of time. The eyes are getting stronger. If you don't make a decision soon, they'll make it for you. Amara stood, determination hardening her features. Then I'll fight them. I won't let this curse define me. The following night, Amara and Tunde prepared for a final confrontation. They gathered every protective tool they could find: salt, candles, mirrors, and charms from the journal. If Amara couldn't destroy the eyes, she would find a way to bind them permanently. As the clock neared midnight, the air in Amara's dorm grew heavy. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and the room seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. They're coming, Tunde said, his voice tense. Amara sat in the center of the room, the silver mirror in her lap. She had tied her headtie tightly, but she could feel the eyes stirring beneath it, desperate to break free. Let them come, she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her heart. The room plunged into darkness. The candles flickered wildly, their flames casting twisted shadows on the walls. The whispers became a deafening roar, and the eyes on Amara's scalp snapped open, their glowing irises piercing through the fabric of her head tie. Amara! A voice boomed, deep and guttural. You cannot defy us! Amara clenched her fists. I didn't choose this. You don't control me. The voice laughed, a sound that sent shivers down her spine. You are merely a vessel, a conduit for our vengeance. You cannot escape us. Amara gritted her teeth, her resolve hardening. Maybe not, but I can contain you. She raised the silver mirror, angling it toward the eyes. The glowing irises reflected in the surface, and the room erupted in blinding light. The eyes screamed, their voices shrill and furious, as the mirror absorbed their energy. Now, Tunde! Amara shouted. Tunde threw a handful of black salt into the air, completing the binding spell from the journal. The salt formed a shimmering barrier around Amara, trapping the eyes within. The light grew brighter and brighter until it consumed everything. When the light faded, the room was silent. Amara lay on the floor, her body trembling but alive. She reached up to touch her head and realized the eyes were gone. Tunde knelt beside her, helping her sit up. Are you okay? Amara nodded weakly. I think it worked. The silver mirror lay shattered on the floor, its surface dark and lifeless. The curse had been contained, but at a cost. What happens now? Tunde asked. Amara looked out the window at the rising sun, her expression weary but hopeful. Now, I live, and I make sure no one else has to bear this burden again. Though the eyes were gone, Amara knew the curse wasn't truly broken. But for the first time in her life, she felt free. She and Tunda had faced the darkness and survived, and together, they would find a way to ensure it stayed buried forever. Please subscribe, like, and comment to our channel to help us grow. Thank you for watching.